There's new data from a combination of the UN's International Organization for Migration, as well as the International Labor Organization and the Walk Free Foundation. And it is as serious and dark as anything we've talked about for some time. The number of people currently in a state of slavery around the globe has grown by 10 million in just the last 5 years. That's just the growth. That's not the total number. And in just a little bit of time, as of last year, they estimate 50 million people in some form of slavery. And they say that it exists in nearly every country in the world. There is no region, they say, of the world that is immune to modern slavery. Now, they give a little bit more information about some of the forms that this come in. So many of the people characterized as modern slaves endure conditions considered forced labor, where they're employed but unable to quit because their employer withholds their earnings. They owe debt to their employer, or for migrants, their employer threatens deportation. So this is effectively slavery, but with like the wrapping paper of capitalism. We're going to pretend that you're not working for no pay. There's technically pay, but you can't have it. It's mine. I got it. Or I make up this debt, and then you'll spend the rest of your life paying it off. You'll never actually get ahead. You'll never actually be free. You're not technically a slave, but you are 100% in a state of slavery. And if you're working terrified at all times that you could be thrown out of the country, that's effectively forced work too. And we've got 28 million people in forced labor conditions. An eighth of them, by the way, as of 2021, are children. So this is child economic slavery. Most obviously taking place in the private sector, some by government. So that's fun. You also have 22 million people living in forced marriages as of just last year. That number has jumped by 6.6 million in just the last half decade. And so there has been improvement in a number of different areas, pandemic aside, in a lot of different societies. But it isn't just that this stuff still exists, it's that it's growing very rapidly, JR, and that is incredibly depressing.
It's growing because things continue to get worse and worse for the most regular, vulnerable people. And slavery, enslaved folks, in multiple ways, we call it modern slavery now, is based off of the most vulnerable people. That's why there's child labor laws. That's why there was issues against folks who maybe are stuck in these particular situations. So, which again, is another offshoot of our propensity to think capitalism is the best thing we could ever do. Make as much money by using people and not pay them as much as possible so you can get as much of it back. And then eventually folks go, I can make more if I go after vulnerable people or if I enslave someone. So they do that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have an obligation here in the US or wherever you're watching to do something about this. Not only because it's the moral thing to do, not only because it's consistent with our values, but because our existence, the economic system that we are accustomed to, is what produces this. They say this is not a thing of just like poor, lawless countries. Rich countries both have this sort of slavery, and their desire for products produces the industry in other countries. People are forced to work for no pay to produce goods for Western society. And so whether we know it or not, so I apologize, it might be inconvenient that we're forcing this knowledge on you. Our existence produces this sort of injustice, this sort of cruelty. And so we have an obligation to do whatever we can to help end it.